Welcome to Streamlining Your HR, the simple and effective approach to human resource management in small business. You want a really organised system. You don't want to have to be looking for different forms and different versions of forms that people have created over time for hiring, firing, managing staff. You want to ensure that you're compliant, and you want it in the most organised and easy system that you can have. And you might not be an HR person. You could be someone who's just had the human resource area fall into their lap as part of an administration role or other area in the business. So you might be new to all of this, you might be great at modelling things, and you just need a system to start with. So we're just going to give you a bit of an introduction to what you should include in your system. So what do you need? You need policies, procedures, forms, checklists, and you need them in different areas. So the areas that would be best to cover are recruitment, so that is recruiting staff, hiring new staff, employment, the actual hiring of them or the paperwork that needs to be done, position descriptions, they are used for both employment, performance reviews, training, a lot of different areas. Performance management, now that's when you encounter a staff member that's not behaving appropriately or their work isn't up to standard and you need to manage their performance. And in today's day and age, unfair dismissal cases are going through the roof. So you want to make sure that you manage that performance very well and have all the documentation that you need in case an unfair dismissal case is brought against you. Performance reviews, that's the positive end of things. You want to be able to review your staff and make sure that you get something out of that review, that it's not just a tick box type of session. And not all small businesses will use reviews, and so it's really important that if you are wanting to use them, that they're quick, easy and thorough enough that it's not just a tick box again, that you are getting something out of it, you're aligning your business goals with your organisational goals. And then there's training, of course. You want to make sure your staff are all up to speed with the training that they require, or if you're going to move them on in a career path in your business, you want to make sure you've got all the documentation to make sure that training happens in your business. Remuneration and benefits. This is going to be the big draw card for why people come and work for you and stay with you. So remuneration is obviously salary, and benefits can be anything from other enticements such as company cars, salary sacrificing, but right through to any fun benefits that you can give out or rewards you can give your staff if they do something positive. There's a whole heap of things you can do there. You want to make sure that it's easy to do that. Termination, obviously that's one to get right. It's the tricky end of the business, and not everyone likes that side of things. If you're looking at terminating for poor performance or for redundancy, there are different ways to handle that, and you want to make sure that you are covered. Policies and procedures, they underpin the whole of your HR program. So if you're writing a process for HR for a particular element, you need to make sure that you've got a procedure there for carrying it out, and are there any other policies and procedures that go with it that might need to be distributed to employees so they know where they stand. Okay, in detail, with employment, the types of things you're going to want in your kit are employment contracts. Now you want a different one for part-time, full-time, casual, and if they're under a different award, many businesses will have a few different awards in their business. You need to have the award on file as well, and the contract should relate off to the award. You obviously want a letter of offer, so that makes it clear what the person's signing up for. The personnel form, that's recording all your documentation for them starting, their bank account details, their emergency contact details, right through to make sure that you ask the question of whether they have any injury that's going to prevent them from doing their work, a pre-existing injury. So that's an important one, to make sure that you've got your form complete and you're not keeping on going back to the employee. Oh, can I have your license now? Can I have this now? It makes it seem much more professional in your business when your personnel form is thorough. And then that needs to be kept in file, and it's a compliance issue. So if you did get audited by Fair Work Australia, they would be looking definitely for personnel forms and employment contracts. So a commencement form, you don't need this in every business, but it's a great way of noting down the salary, any other details of what's been negotiated during the recruitment phase, and you can then pass that on to your accounts person, and that might be an outsourced person or someone who comes in part-time. And rather than them have to come and say, now I noticed you've got a new person starting, I guess I have to pay them today, what are their details? You can give them the personnel form and the commencement form, and on the HR shed we have a copy of the commencement form and all these other documents. But they know straight away, they don't have to come and see you and they're up and running. It can even be a number of hours, what days of the week they're going to work, and is it full-time, part-time, all that sort of jazz. A Fair Work information statement is absolutely 100% vital. If you do not hand this out, you can be fined in the hundreds of dollars just for one bit of paper that is a bit of a bore to print out, but you must hand it out to all new employees. Uniform order form. If you have uniforms, is it easy enough to grab out a uniform order and give it to the employee? Because there's nothing worse than being the only employee out of uniform because no one's bothered to say, have you ordered your uniform yet? What do we need? And it just streamlines the process for you. An induction checklist and a process to follow to make sure that that induction is done correctly. Now, in some businesses, inductions will be done by the HR manager, they might be done by the OHS person, they could be done by a combination of people, the CEO might have something to say, but a health and safety rep can do the OHS component as well. So it's really important that that process covers off who's doing what and when, and then you follow it, and you don't have to think about that again. Every time you have a new start, yes, we grab the induction checklist out, we tick the boxes, it's all done. And an induction sign-off is a great thing to have too, especially if you've referred to specific policies and procedures that you want the employee to abide by. You're getting their buy-in at the right time and upon commencement when they're all excited to be coming and working for you. You want them to sign off that they've actually read and understood those policies and procedures. And that in their minds will be them signing off to say, yeah, I'm going to abide by those. It just means you have less hassle later on, that people will reject certain policies that the organisation really does require adherence to. Okay, moving on to recruitment. You want a good set of interview questions. If you have a base set of interview questions, you can manoeuvre them around for different interviews. So every time you do an interview, make sure you pull together the best set of questions and keep it in a document. You want selection criteria attached to those questions. If you've got a position description that has clear selection criteria on how you're going to work out who's the best one for the role, what experience they've had, what education, all those sorts of things, then you want to have that selection criteria addressed in the interview, because you want to know that they're going to be able to address that when they come and work for you, that they're going to meet your criteria. So why not make it up front and start talking about it in the interview? Position description we've talked about before. You want a basic ad format. That just makes it easy to put something together as a draft, send it out to your manager for approval, and then upload it to Seek or whatever service you're using. Phone interview sheet. I always do phone interviews first. It's a quick way of getting to know whether the people are worth coming in for an interview, and my phone interviews are reasonably thorough, so I'll take some of those good interview questions and put them into my phone interview sheet, and then I might just rearrange some of them for the formal interview as well. A recruitment request. If you're just slightly larger or you have different sites around Australia, it's good to have your manager or whoever's approving the request for recruitment to send through documentation to whoever's actually writing the ad that yes, this is approved to go ahead, because sometimes managers will start talking about a job role that's coming up and they're actually not ready to place the ad yet. And I know as a you want to get ahead of them and you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're proactive. Sometimes you might go along and start your recruitment process and they haven't actually put a request through yet. So sometimes a piece of paper is a way of getting action, or at least finding out where it's up to. You obviously want to notify the applicants who have put their resumes into you, which is largely via email these days. You want to have some sort of template that you can just whip back out to them to say, yes, thank you very much for your application and we will be looking at it, or else you'll get hundreds of phone calls, you'll be having emails coming in, where's my application up to, and it's better especially if you're advertising what your organisation is, it's much better for your branding to have a positive approach to recruitment where you do appreciate the applicants. And there's constant grizzling out there that people just don't get back to them. They don't know if they've had their application even read or received. So do take the time, it is time, and apply that etiquette, and you'll appreciate it one day when you are on the other end of the process. And have a recruitment process, and that'll mean that you don't miss any detail, and the managers will know what they need to do and you'll know what you need to do, and you can come to some agreement on what role you will play in the recruitment process. Position descriptions. You want a template, and that will make all your position descriptions consistent and you won't miss key areas when you're formulating a new position description. Again, key selection criteria is important. That should be at the end of your position description. On the front page, you want to have a key responsibility. What's the main thing you want them to achieve? Whether it's a generic overview, you can have also what the company overview is. Not all small businesses will go for that. That seems to be more of a larger business thing. Then you want the tasks that people will be responsible for. Now, there's two different trains of thought on that too. You can have it as a general task list listing all the tasks, or you can have it as KPIs, things that they need to achieve. So it's just a different way of writing them. Accountabilities, you really want to spell out what they are accountable for, especially if you've got some, get rid of that, especially if you've got some people in the business that might be veering on the supervisor role or the manager role, and they don't really know whether they are allowed to fire people or they are allowed to start working on performance management, or does that need to go escalating up to the higher level. So make sure you put accountabilities in there, and that could be financial accountabilities. They might be able to, they might be accountable for putting the budget together. They might be able to spend up to $500 without asking, those sorts of things, just to make it really clear. And then you want to sign off, and that means that they have understood that position description, they've signed off, and you've got a date on it, and then it goes into their personnel file. They obviously will want their own copy. And yes, again, do put a date on it and a version number, because you want to be able to track when position descriptions change. It's very important. Performance management. There's a process to follow for performance management, and you need to do it every time, because it's the biggest risk in a business can be unfair dismissal claims, and the stress that it that puts on managers and individuals involved. It's just not worth it. So make sure you do follow that process. So you want a disciplinary action procedure, and that means that you know what to do when you are disciplining someone, and it would refer off to the right documentation to use. You do need documented evidence of every type of performance management conversation that you have. Even if you do a verbal warning, document that on a particular date, whether it's in your calendar or you get them to sign a verbal warning, because some people will say, well, I never had a verbal warning, when they did, but you've got no evidence of it. And if people won't sign these things, you can get someone as a witness who might have witnessed you say that to them. You just want as much evidence as you can in case it goes to the tribunal. So you want templates for verbal warning, written warning, second written warning, final warning, termination letter. This is the stuff you do not want to have to be drawing up from scratch at an emotionally charged time when you've got to get it out straight away. Have that as your templates and you will be cruising along. And you also, if you have less than 15 employees, you need to make sure you've got the small business dismissal code down pat and really understand what they're asking for, because they actually do require you to fill out a form for that now. Performance reviews. We want a performance review template, possibly a rating sheet if you're going to score people, a review process and a policy so people understand why they're having a review and what sort of process it will take. You want to make sure that your managers who are doing these reviews are trained to be able to undertake that process, because performance reviews can leave a really bad taste in your mouth if they're not handled well. So you really want that training so people feel confident as a manager to go in and do the review and get the most out of the session, and that employees feel confident that they've had a good experience, even if there's some negative in it, that it seemed professional in its approach. You want a follow-up checklist, because a performance review should never just be a one-off thing with no action out of it. So make sure that there's a checklist to follow up and that all the paperwork is distributed accordingly. You want a training needs analysis, because anything that's a gap identified needs to be filled potentially with training, so you'll fill that out at the time of the review. And you really want an action plan. If people aren't quite meeting the criteria that you want them to, the best thing to do is have an action plan that lasts for the rest of the year until their next review, to set some goals and see whether they can achieve them. It'll really guide them on what your expectations are. Training. Again, a training needs analysis is the first step for training. Now make sure if you've got compliance areas in your business, such as people who have to have a forklift license to be able to drive a forklift, first aiders have to have regular training and be renewed. They can't be out of date. Health and safety reps need regular training. So if you've got any of those things that are compliance related, make sure that you have a training matrix of who they relate to, what roles need to have that training, what the training's called, who you usually access that training through, the cost, and then also when it's required. So that just makes it really easy for you to assess who's at what stage, who needs that training, have we covered it all. You want a training record. You want to know that the people have been trained. You want to know when the renewals are due. This can be done on an Excel database or Access database or something. We also have HR Intranet, which has many databases in it, very easy online forms to use that go directly into the database. So we find that very helpful. And you want a training request form. Sometimes staff will come to you, and in a small business environment it can be a bit embarrassing. They come to you with a great idea, they've seen this course and they really want to go for it, and they just verbally tell you about the course and they want you to make a decision on it. Now, what the request form should have on it is they should need to do some legwork first. So they will be bringing this request form to you completed with why they want to do the course, what sort of things that it looks like it's going to train them in that are going to benefit the business or link back to their performance review or the goals that you've set. What's the cost of it? When is it on? Does anyone else need this training? That sort of thing needs to be thought through to make it a really streamlined approach, and one that you can justify of why you're saying no to some training and yes to others. Remuneration and benefits. You want an understanding of salary bands. What type of salaries are people on in those positions out there? And that's a bit of researching the market. And then you band the lowest to the highest in that category. So when you're making salary decisions or supporting your boss in making them, then you can have some guidelines to work within, and you know that you'll be in amongst what the market is expecting. Or if you're not, if you're on the low end, you can have some other strategies of what other benefits you're going to try and sell to the applicant. And this is really a marketing approach. This is why should this person come and work for your business. You want to really build up all the positives, and benefits aren't just physical benefits. They can be things like flexible work practices. They can be things like location. They can be things like bring your dog on Fridays, whatever. You can think of all sorts of different benefits that might suit your particular audience that you're trying to draw from. With regard to flexible work practices, there is a requirement that organisations do consider all flexible work arrangements that are put forward by their staff if they have got school-aged children. So you need to look at that. You should have a policy on that, and you want to make sure that if you're saying no to things, that you've got really good reasons and you have actually documented that. You obviously want a record of when things change so that you can track when people's salary goes up. And you want to have a way to communicate and approve salary increases internally. If you're a bit of a disjointed organisation, you're not all in the one spot, it's really important that you have that approval process quite smooth to make sure it's streamlined. There's nothing worse than someone who's been promised a salary increase and it hasn't actually hit yet because the general manager's still got the paperwork on his desk, or he has forgotten to ring the accounts person to put it through. Termination. This is the negative end of the stick. You would need a termination letter, termination process. With the letter you actually might need a couple of letters depending on why the termination's occurring. The process to follow so you don't miss anything. A return of items checklist is great, especially if you've got uniforms or you've given out laptops, keys, cars, all that sort of thing. A letter of resignation template. It really is important to get a resignation from your staff if they are resigning, and a verbal resignation isn't enough. There have been cases where people have come in and resigned, whatever the reason, but often through pressure. They feel that they need to go, only to turn around, get advice that they shouldn't have resigned, and because there's nothing in writing, they will call it being terminated. So don't let that backfire on you. You want a redundancy checklist as well to make sure that if you're calling this a redundancy, it is a reasonable redundancy, that it actually meets the redundancy criteria, or you may expose yourself to unfair dismissal. You want a notice periods table so you can work out what sort of notice period you need to give, because most modern awards these days, in fact I think all of them, will refer off to the National Employment Standards, which has a specific notice periods table, so that applies for everyone. And you want an exit interview questionnaire if you're going to take it to the next level. If you want to get some feedback, your great performer might decide to leave. You might want to know why, and that could just be a little conversation around the water cooler, or it could be a formal sit down, or send them the questionnaire for them to complete. Policies and procedures. As the policy nut that I am, I love them, and they really do work when you get them right. There is a myriad of policies and procedures that should be make it into your workplace. On the HR Shed, we have over 60 of them, and they're fantastic because if you get people to read them up front when they're all happy and want to be working for you, they're going to sign off and say yes, and they're a way of changing the organisational culture. We've got a whole nother video program on what is a great policy and procedure and how do you write that. So that's something to look at as well if you need some help in that area. Otherwise, purchase the HR Shed and get them all as Word documents that you can change and alter for your organisation. But just to start with, some of the important ones are company car, mobile phone, drug and alcohol, telephone, flexible work arrangements, taking leave, parental leave, paid parental leave. They're the things that are going to probably come up over and over in your business, and you're going to get sick of talking about them. So rather than have to reinforce your message all the time verbally, put it down in paper, introduce the new employee to it when they start, get them to sign off on it, and you've got much more of a chance of having them abide by them.